And this is an updated version of the introduction to ChatGPT. I've had to update it because in the small amount of time since I recorded the last video, a lot of progress has been made. And students, quite frankly, have gotten better at using some of these new technologies to get around what's expected in my class. And like I say, by now you should know this, that in order to do well in my class, two things. One, I have very high expectations because I've seen over and over again that students at College of the Canyons are really talented. And two, that you are supposed to rely solely on my lecture videos in order to answer essay questions. And so in the last semesters, I've run into a couple problems, and I've talked about it elsewhere, but I'm going to reiterate it in this video so that if I run into problems from this point forward, I'm just going to say, watch the video because I warned you about this. And I'm going to show no sympathy whatsoever. So I'm telling you what my expectations are and how I grade. And you have to think hard about whether or not you want to take this class and whether you're hoping you can trick me. Okay? And I'm going to try and convince you that I don't think you can. I'd rather do that and have you drop the class and take somebody else's class that maybe you can trick than to take my class and wind up with getting a C or a D or even worse, a fail, or even worse, me having to go ahead and report you to the Dean of Students for academic dishonesty. So first, as I've said before, in other parts of the syllabus and videos, while I'm telling you that you have to rely solely on what I say in my lecture videos, you cannot just write a transcript of what I say. You cannot copy down basically word for word what I say and then submit that as an essay. When I speak, I kind of jump around a little bit. I don't speak in complete sentences. It's not always crystal clear like the way an essay is. Speaking extemporaneously isn't very organized and coordinated, and sentences aren't well thought out. I just kind of talk while I'm thinking. Your essays can't be that way. Your essays are supposed to take my somewhat rambling speaking style and convert it into an essay. Now, again, I've said before, you don't have to write an introductory essay. You don't have to write a conclusion. When you're looking at the study guide and writing out the essays on the study guide, which are available when this class starts, you should be writing an essay form, not bullet points, nothing, just essay form, paragraphs. No introductory paragraph, no conclusion, just answer the questions. So what I have here on the screen are actual essays that were submitted by other students in other classes. Okay, and this will give you an idea of, one, what I'm looking for, and two, how it is I can tell when somebody's using an alternative source like ChatGPT or even Grammarly or Copilot or Gemini or all the other programs that are out there, and there'll probably be 20 more by the time I'm done with this video. So first, some of this isn't going to make sense right now, and you might want to look back at it when you're getting ready to prepare for exam 1, because I'm talking about things that we obviously haven't discussed in class yet. So one of the questions I ask, you see at the top, it says, what are the powers unique to the House of Representatives? And this is an actual essay. The student wrote, revenue bills, impeachment power, electing the president. That's pretty much taken directly from the lecture notes themselves. I have no idea if that student understands anything about what they wrote. They just wrote titles. That's all they wrote. That student got a fail on that. Okay? So just so you know, I'm looking for people to write things, not just copying what I have on my lecture notes onto that. That's completely unacceptable. If you were thinking that was acceptable, think again. Okay, one of the questions I ask on the study guide, and let me move this out of the way so you can see it, is what are the 4 advantages that private interest groups have over public interest groups? Be sure to explain each. So what I have here is an essay that a student submitted. Now, how do I know that this was generated by some other source? One, the 4 things that I listed are not listed there. And there's all kinds of terminology in the essay that aren't from my lecture videos. For example, I never use the phrase focused agenda, right? In this one, this essay says something about grassroots fundraising. It refers to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. It talks about how much they spend $500 million lobbying. I never said any of that, right? They talk about, when they talk about direct benefits to members, they talk about how the American Medical Association works to increase Medicare reimbursements. I never said anything about that in the video. You won't find anything in my videos about that. They talk about one of the advantages that they have established networks. I never use that phrase. As soon as I saw this, I didn't have to even read this essay. I knew it was derived from an alternative source. They automatically fail. Now, oftentimes what I'll do is on the exam 1, since this is a 20-point question, I gave them 10 points. But eventually what happened is they wound up getting like a D on exam 1. And so it makes it very hard to recover. Here's another answer to this question. Oh no, this one is the bureaucracy question. And again, this isn't going to make sense because we haven't talked about some of this information yet. But it says the bureaucracy has a great deal of power because of its rule-making authority. What is the difference between a law and a rule? Using the Occupational Safety and Health Administration as an example, give an example of how the bureaucracy uses rule-making authority. Identify some of the limits placed on rule-making authority of the bureaucracy. Once again, as in the first example, this essay includes all kinds of terminology that are not from the lecture. I never talked about limiting noise exposure to 8 hours a day. I never talked about chemical exposure or noise exposure. One of the things that's true about the bureaucracy is that when they issue rules, and you'll find out what that means later on, they have to get public input. But I never talk about that part of rulemaking. You know why? I purposely leave it out so that anytime I see anything in an essay that has to do with public input, I know the student relied on an alternative source. I don't even bother reading it. They fail on the exam 1. They got 10 points out of 20. If they do the same thing on exam 2, they get 0 points out of 20. That easy. When I see phrases like the bureaucratic OSHA turn actionable steps while staying accountable through checks and balances. I never said that. I don't talk like that. I mean, one of the things I try and do is break things down in like sort of understandable terms. I don't talk like that. And when I do, I try and correct myself. Here, once again, there's no indication that this student, if you look at the essay is a good essay. There's just no indication that the student actually watched the lecture videos. They include, because if you input my essay into ChatGPT or Gemini, or you write an essay and then stick it into Grammarly, it's going to write all kinds of stuff that it's going to add in there, right? So in this essay, they referred to the Congressional Review Act. I never said anything about the Congressional Review Act. I don't even know what it is. It says similarly, the judiciary can invalidate rules that exceed the agency's authority or fail to comply with legal procedures. I never said that. I don't talk like that, right? My job is to break things down. Once again, it talks about how the bureaucracy offers a notice and comment period, ensuring transparency and accountability. That's nowhere in my lecture video. Automatically, I see that the student gets 10 out of 20. Same thing. This one has terminology that isn't in the class, but the other way that I can tell when people are using alternative sources or using AI programs is the way they format things. So for example, in this essay, they did a little introduction, used some terminology. In contrast, they write a rule is a specific guidance or standard a bureaucratic agency creates to operationalize the law. I don't talk like that. I don't talk like that. And in the video, sometimes I do in my private discussions, but I tend not to. And then here, when it came to limiting the limits on the bureaucracy, all of a sudden they break down into this formatting where they use 4 different constraints. That's not what I said in the lecture. I organized it in the lecture so it could be written in an essay. I never taught, here's public input one more time. That's one of the things that happens when people use alternative sources. The same things that I never discussed in my lecture videos show up in their essays. So once again, public input, not part of what I talked about. Budgetary constraints, not what I talked about when I talked about the bureaucracy. And then one final example here, once again, they mention public input. But here's another way that I could tell. Here, read this sentence here. The rulemaking authority is not unlimited, though. While OSHA can develop rules related to workplace safety, it must do so within the framework of enabling legislation. Enabling legislation. I know what that means because I have a PhD in political science, but I don't talk like that. And so I know they didn't get that from my lecture videos. Period. I know it. And once again, a mention of public input. Here's a question that I asked that we'll be doing at the very end of the semester about strict and loose constructionists and how they make decisions. You don't need to worry about the details. But what I can tell you is as soon as I saw this essay, I knew it was not based on my lecture. They used the phrase judicial restraint. You will not hear me say that once in this lecture video. They refer to the Dred Scott versus Stanford case. I never discussed it. They talk about judicial overreach. You won't find that in my lecture at all. And here, very interestingly, they wrote that strict constructionists are rooted in their belief that the judiciary should not legislate from the bench. And they even put it in quotes. That quote wasn't from me. I don't talk like that. I didn't say that. They referred to the 14th Amendment and Griswold versus Connecticut, a court case that in the context of this lecture, I never mentioned. I talked about it later in a different context, but not in this one. These are all different ways in which I can tell. You know, I don't want to go into too many examples. Well, here, let me just give a few more so that you get the idea that it's easy to tell. It's easy. So in this case, they're talking about strict and loose constructionists. And in this case, they're talking about loose constructionists. And they say they would argue that while the Constitution does not explicitly mention privacy, it can be inferred from other rights and amendments such as the First, Fourth, and Ninth Amendments. Well, first of all, the First Amendment has nothing to do with privacy. The Fourth Amendment and the Ninth Amendment, you can make the argument. But I never discussed those in the lecture videos. When they put it in here, I know they've gone to an alternative source. Here's one that's just blatant plagiarism. They start off by talking about judicial philosophy plays a significant role in how judges interpret the Constitution and make decisions on legal cases. I never talked about judicial philosophy in this part of the lecture, right? And you can take a political theory class and you'll hear about it, but not in my class. They talk about strict constructionists, and I know you don't know what strict constructionists are. It says one of their main arguments is that judges should not create new rights, let alone new powers are not specifically mentioned in the Constitution. That's actually true, but I never said that. I never said what their main argument was. I talked about a specific case and how they would approach a specific case. I know the student is relying on alternative sources to get that. But this one was really funny. I hope people are still watching. In their actual essay, I'm just skimming. I'm not reading the essay because I can tell already that it's been plagiarized from somewhere else. Then all of a sudden I read and it says, here is your essay formatted in MLA style. I mean, they put that right into Canvas. So they clearly copied this. And then what it did is it formatted the essay and said the same thing that they wrote at the beginning, but they said it over again. So if you're going to cheat, at least make an effort. Once again, here they refer to the Constitution as a living document. People use that phrase all the time. I don't use it I don't think I ever used living document. Maybe if you see the videos, you'll find that. I don't think I talked about it as a living document. This essay, I didn't even bother reading it. This was exam 2. This person got 0 points. This is a 50-point question. This person got 0 points on this. This person failed the class, right? So look at the essay. It's a long essay, really long essay, right? Problem is, it had nothing to do with my lecture videos. And then finally, the very last one. This is a question I'll be talking about, a law called Phil's Corn Law. You're going to hear a lot about Phil's Corn Law. And I explained the different things that can happen once a bill winds up on the president's desk. And what they wrote down here is in fact accurate, that if Congress adjourns within 10 days of a bill being sent to the president and the president doesn't sign the bill is effectively vetoed. Well, it's not effectively vetoed. I would never use that terminology. A veto is a veto. It just means that it doesn't become law. But I never talk about when there's a 10-day period. I never say excluding Sundays, right? Because I don't think that's that important. When I see the word excluding Sundays, that's all it takes for me to know that the essay was used alternative sources. Was it the textbook? Don't know. Was it the ChatGPT, Gemini, Copilot, or even Grammarly? Don't know. What I do know is it wasn't based on the lecture videos. And so I hope students are paying attention, because this semester I'm not going to tolerate any of this. If it looks like you've used my lecture notes and an alternative source, you'll get 50% of the points. I won't even read your essay. As soon as I see any of these clues that it wasn't based on my lecture videos, you'll get 10 out of 20 or 25 out of 20 on exam 1. If it happens on exam 2, on a 50-point question on exam 1, you'll get 25 points, which is basically an F. On exam 2, you'll get 0 points. Okay. You might think that this is unfair. I totally get that. Don't take my class. And I'm not anti-technology. If you want to use Grammarly, or if you want to use some other AI program to help you write your essay, go ahead and do it. I think it can be a valuable tool. I use it too. But what you're going to need to do is when it cranks out an essay, you need to go through that essay meticulously and make sure that there's nothing in the essay that you can't point to a lecture video and say, no, Phil, you said it right here. You said it right here. If you can't do that, if you can't tell me where you got that information, that phrase, right, then I'm going to grade you as if you relied on an alternative source. Again, you might not think that's fair. I get that. You might think I'm being kind of harsh. I get that too. You don't have to take my class. You can take somebody else's class. Okay? So I'm just being upfront with you. And then that way, if anybody has any questions later on, I can say, watch the video. Okay? Don't mean to be harsh. Don't mean to be unfair. But I do want to be clear. Okay?